The road to hell, it started here. She made it back. Inge Auerbacher. Stuttgart, Theresienstadt, one-way ticket. Remembering the deportation of the Jews. A documentary by Joachim Auch. Stuttgart, Northern Station. This is where the deportations began. To preserve the old rails as a memorial, as an authentic sign of remembrance, that's the aim of the Foundation Geisstraße. The beginning of a very special journey with Garry, Fabian and Inge Auerbacher, both Holocaust survivors from Stuttgart, now living in the USA and Australia. Also part of the group, teenagers like Anna Beilharz, artists and local politicians. "50 people are about to embark on a train journey into the past, from Stuttgart to the former concentration camp Theresienstadt. I think it's important to ask questions while you still have the chance, before there's nobody left who lived at that time. I was born on the 31st of December 1934 in Kippenheim, a small town in southern Germany, on the edge of the Black Forest. I was the last Jewish child born there. 1938. The Nazis destroy the synagogues. Inge Auerbacher's family seek refuge in her grandparents' house in Göppingen. Those were the best years of my childhood. I had wonderful friends and almost no enemies. All of us children played together. That was the only time when I was just a child. The grave of Inge Auerbacher's grandfather. He died before the family was deported, after having been detained by the Nazis. He died in May 1939, and many neighbors came to his funeral. That could have turned out badly for them. Somebody took photos, but they insisted on coming. My parents married on the 26th of June 1932 in Berlin. Afterwards they moved to Stuttgart, where my father worked in the tobacco trade. I was born on the 11th of January 1934 in Stuttgart and called Gerhard because my mother admired the famous writer Gerhard Hauptmann. Garry Fabian and his wife retracing the steps of his childhood. Stählinweg, number 18. This is where the Fabians lived before being deported. Mrs. Bartenbach, may I introduce you to a former tenant, Mr. Fabian. He lived here as a child. Please, come in.
Das ist sehr schön.
Ja, das ist sehr schön.
Haben Sie hier gewohnt oder unten?
Nein, hier im zweiten Stock.
Ja. Wo war da dein Zimmer? Wo hast du geschlafen?
Das weiß ich nicht genau. Ich glaube, es war das
Ich zeige
kleine.
Ihnen nachher das Schlafzimmer,
Das
aber die
kleine.
Betten sind noch nicht gemacht. Das macht nichts.
What was the last thing the Fabians saw looking out of this window? They tried to get away, moving further and further eastwards. The Nazis caught up with them in Prague. They left Stuttgart because of the political situation, but apart from that, they really liked Stuttgart. January 1939. Hitler threatens to exterminate the Jews. Even if the internationally operating money Jews succeed in plunging the peoples of Europe into a Second World War, the result will not be a Bolshevik world, but the extermination of European Jews. Stuttgart Central Station. The journey into the past begins. More than 60 years after the Jews from Württemberg were deported into the death camps of Theresienstadt, Auschwitz or Riga. 60 years, that's a long time for 18-year-olds like Anna Beilharz and her friends. Not many people's memory goes back that far. Garry Fabian's does. There were 11 transports from Stuttgart. 2,500 people were transported by train from here into the concentration camps. Only 1 in 10 lived to see the liberation. Inge Auerbacher's eviction order. The transport will take place on Saturday, the 22nd of August 1942. Any resistance would be futile. 1 suitcase per person only. The German railway charges third-class group rate one-way ticket. The city of Stuttgart has a propaganda movie shot that is meant to show how orderly the so-called final solution to the Jewish question is organized. For 2 days, the Jews were gathered in halls that were later demolished to give way for the Stuttgart Fair. Does anybody remember? Anna and her friends asked people in the neighborhood.
Wir sind direkt den ganzen Weg einfach nachgelaufen.
What we did was we walked all the way down to the station, looking for houses old enough to have been there in those days, and rang the bell. But there were only few people who remembered anything. I have to go up there to my pharmacy, and every time I go there, the memories come back. It was terrible. They all sat around. They were very, very sad. They hardly said anything. And they were all wearing the yellow star. My father said, they will all be killed. And I said, that's impossible, really impossible. But we didn't dare to talk to other people about it.
Und mein Vater hat dann gesagt, die werden alle umgebracht. Und ich habe gesagt, das ist doch unmöglich, das ist doch unmöglich. Aber auf der Straße hat man mit niemand darüber gesprochen.
Shy smiles, careful questions. Anna and her friends on one side, the Holocaust survivors on the other. Just call me Garry, I'm Inge. Familiar terms, painful memories. Telling them what it was like on their first journey to Theresienstadt, in a terrible time, in a terrible train.
Man konnte nicht auf dem
Ich erinnere mich noch ganz richtig, wie das war. Es war ein Personenzug.
I remember quite clearly. It was a passenger train, and I know I sat facing this way. There were 3 people sitting opposite. I was 7 years old, the youngest child in transport number 13-1. That was the first one from Stuttgart to Theresienstadt. My number was 13-1-408. I'll never forget that number. And we didn't know where we were going. I was afraid, and I remember I got sick. That was awful for the people around us.
Ich habe Angst gehabt. Und ich weiß noch, mir war schlecht im Magen. Und das war furchtbar für die Leute, wo da drin waren. Ich meine, wir durften ja nicht raus.
railway workers stand on parade for Adolf Hitler. The railway system played an important part in the destruction of the Jews. Deportation trains were not top secret. The plight of the people on the train must have been noticed. But no railway worker refused to do his job. Even after the Holocaust, no one was tried for assisted mass murder. People went on with their careers. Albrecht Zahn, whose signature was found on the timetables for the death trains, was appointed station master of Stuttgart. Let's assume you are the station master of Stuttgart and you are ordered to organize a deportation train. What would you have done? I don't know. I really don't know if I would have had the character and strength to resist in any way. I keep thinking what I would have done, but really, I don't know.
Jeder von uns.
Nobody knows what you would have done in the situation. Is it a job like any other, a train like any other? No matter if it carries wheat or juice or coal, I often ask myself, what would I have done?
Passagiere, das ist eine Frage, die ich mich oft frage, was hätte ich gemacht?
On the train today, artists, teenagers and the former prisoners of Theresienstadt. Why artists? Because people kept drawing, making music and playing theatre even in the concentration camps. Sometimes secretly, at the risk of their lives, sometimes with the connivance of the SS. Art not as a luxury, but as a means to survive. With Inge and Anna on the train, an Israeli actor who will perform with his partner, a puppeteer from Tübingen at Theresienstadt. A drama about Germans and Jews. The story of a Jewish prisoner and a German concentration camp commander.
Da sie ihn auch beim dritten Versuch nicht töten konnten,
because he didn't die, no matter what they did to him, the Germans chased Angel Wassermann to the office of the commander. I can see them. Off you go, quick, get going. All the way from the lower part of the camp through Heaven Street to the barracks of the commander. Wassermann is gasping for breath. They open the door. There's Obersturmbannführer Neigel, at long last. Neigel.
Und dort sitzt Obersturmbannführer Neigel. Endlich Neigel.
Do you know the theme from Schindler's List?
But my name is Schindler.
Oh, no. I don't believe it. But you know the theme.
Ah, sure.
Can you play that?
And then Peter Schindler plays the very song that sums up Inge's feelings. The German-Czech border. Stuttgart, Theresienstadt, that's 500 kilometers, a dozen change of trains. In those days, a long way. For Inge Auerbacher, it's very close. Litoměřice, Today the last stop before Theresienstadt, an old fortress with thick walls and moat. The Nazis drove the Czechs out of the town and turned the barracks into a concentration camp, absurdly overcrowded with Jews. From the basements to the attics. Hunger, epidemics and constant deportations into the gas chambers of Auschwitz. Looking for traces. Inge and Garry are taking Anna and the group from Stuttgart to those places that were of special importance in their lives as prisoners. During the communist regime, survivors of Theresienstadt were not allowed to visit their former cells because the barracks were used by the Czech army.
You were in here too?
Yep.
Das sind alle Stuttgarter hier raufgebracht worden.
The people from Stuttgart were all taken up these stairs. This is the very place. People slept on the bare floor. Many died here. They were covered with linen. I remember one man from Stuttgart. He tried to jump out of the window. My father kept him back, but the next day he jumped and killed himself. It was one of those windows.
Zurückgehalten. Aber am nächsten Tag ist runter. Hat sich das Leben genommen. Von eins von den Fenstern.
$30,000 deaths in 3 years due to hunger, illness, forced labor. The crematorium is still there.
Wir hatten diese Wagen.
There were carts, flat carts milkmen or bakery shops use. Normally they were drawn by horses. In Theresienstadt they were drawn by people. And on these carts there were heaps of dead bodies every day.
Milchmanns, das hat zu dem täglichen der Szene gehört.
Those who were on the side of the Nazis seldom have the courage to talk about it today. Even more remarkable, what a woman from Stuttgart remembers. She worked as a telephone operator for the SS and for the commander of Theresienstadt.
Das Essen, das war ja kein Essen.
The food didn't really deserve to be called food. The soups I got to see were just foul water. It looked like sewage. Sometimes they got meat, horse meat, but in such small portions that many prisoners died of hunger. That was part of the plan. But I was divided on the subject. Personally, I lived a fabulous life there, a life I could never have afforded myself. And on the other side, there was such misery.
Ich habe ein fabelhaftes Leben gehabt. Ich hätte mir das ja nie und nimmer selber leisten können. Und auf der anderen Seite dieses Elend.
This, of course, was carefully concealed. The Nazis even succeeded in fooling the world public. For a short period of time, the camp was turned into a setting for a propaganda film. There's a lot of gardening to be done by the families. The fruits and vegetables are a welcome addition to the bill of fare. The prisoners were forced to play the roles of happy settlers. Afterwards they were deported to Auschwitz. Hardly anybody survived. The propaganda film is one of the most bizarre aspects of the camp. On their way home, the workers often gather in the stadium. Only people who still look well fed because they had just arrived were forced to take part.
Die Mannschaften sind da aus dem Tor gekommen.
The teams entered the stadium from over there, maybe from the ground floor. There were no glass windows then. The arcades were all open. Due to the somewhat smaller pitch, the teams play 7 versus 7. But still, the audience is enthusiastic and the game tough. The film was called The Führer Presents the Jews with a Town of Their Own. There is a short episode in the film which made Garry Fabian's blood curdle when he first saw it. Amongst the spectators, he detected himself as a boy, 8 years old. Can you tell us what you felt when you discovered yourself in a Nazi film? My first thought was, that's my grandson. It felt very, very strange after 50 years. And it took me right back to that time.
Nach 50 Jahren das zu entdecken und dann sagen, es hat mich zurück in der Zeit gebracht.
The commander's office, the center of terror. Capital punishment was imposed even for minor offenses like smuggling letters. The German employees like Gerlinde R. on the other hand lived in luxury. The telephone operator even started an affair with Commander Siegfried Seidel.
Wir sind sehr viel spazieren gegangen über die Festungswälle. Und dann sind wir sehr
We went for walks on the wall quite often. And we went swimming a lot. I was head over heels in love. But I don't think it was real love.
Es war eine gewisse Verliebtheit schon dabei, aber richtige Liebe war es nicht.
What did you like about Dr. Seidel?
Ja,
Well, he had good manners, if you disregard all the rest. And, you know, he was the first man in my life.
meines Lebens. Und, naja.
Siegfried Seidel has a PhD in philology. As a young man, he joins the National Socialists. At the age of 30, he proudly accepts the order to turn Theresienstadt into a concentration camp. Seidel is fanatically anti-Semitic, supposedly because his father's little business was ruined by a Jewish moneylender.
Als Lagerkommandant war
As a commander, he was extremely rigorous. When the poor Jew, whom he held responsible for the ruin of his father, arrived in the camp, he struck the man to death, right in front of the commander's office. That was horrible.
Sein Vater das Geld verloren hat, hat Anweisung gegeben, wenn der kommt, es muss ihm sofort gemeldet werden. Und der arme Kerl kam und dann hat er sich vorführen lassen und dann hat er vor der Kommandantur totgeschlagen. Das war grauenhaft.
Hier, in diesem Haus.
Here, this was our house. The block of houses for First World War veterans. Inge and her parents were allowed to stay together as a family. Together with 50, 60 others in one room. But still a privilege. Inge's father had been awarded with the Iron Cross for his service to the German people. Anna and the other teenagers are speechless with horror.
Also der Fasttag 1944.
I will never forget Kol Nidre in 1944. The people had already put on their clothes, ready for the transport. They were fasting until the last minute. They prayed. One song I'll never forget. I always remember that on the eve of Yom Kippur. They believed in God until the end. A few days later, they were in Auschwitz.
Jedes Mal an Kol Nidre, der Vorabend vor Yom Kippur. Ich habe sogar ein Lied drüber geschrieben. Haben an Gott geglaubt bis zum Ende. Ein paar Tage später waren sie in Auschwitz.
Verstehst du, ich habe nie Christina, meiner Frau, erzählt, was ich hier für eine Aufgabe habe.
You know, I never told my wife Christina what I'm doing here. When she found out, she didn't want to see me anymore. Why doesn't she understand that all of us in the SS are model fathers? We took an oath to love the Führer, the nation and our families, in this order. And it's those three loves that give us the strength to do our duties, to kill mothers and their babies and still be decent men.
Trotzdem anständige Menschen zu bleiben.
The group from Stuttgart, around the corner of the house where Inge survived a final attack by the SS. The starting point for her struggle to be just a normal young girl, like Anna and her friends.
Und ich weiß noch, ich bin ungefähr hier gestanden.
I remember I was standing about here. Cars and trucks were leaving, and suddenly there was this big noise. I thought it would blow my head off. Someone had thrown hand grenades into the house. One went into the window over there. It killed several people.
Ich habe gemeint, mein Kopf ist weg. Und sind Handgranaten reingeschmissen worden. Und hat es Tote gegeben. Da ist eine Handgranate da ins Fenster rein. Hat Leute getroffen.
The horror of Theresienstadt, revealed by Allied troops liberating the camp. The SS had disappeared. Gibt es einen Ort, der dich besonders mitgenommen hat hier?
Ja, dieser Dachboden eben.
What had the greatest impact on you? The attic. The other places don't look the same anymore. But there, just like Inge said, it felt authentic.
Wann haben Sie Herrn Dr. Seidel denn zum letzten Mal gesehen?
When did you see Dr. Seidel for the last time? That was tragic. I said, "The war is lost. What will you do?" And he said, "What I'll do? I keep the last bullet in my pistol for myself." I didn't tell him at the time, but I thought that's the right thing to do. I knew I wouldn't see him again. And I was completely aghast at hearing that he didn't kill himself.
Ich habe es ihm natürlich nicht gesagt, aber ich fand es richtig. Und ich war hellentsetzt, wie ich erfahren habe, dass sich eben nicht erschossen hat.
Seidel tried to flee the country, was caught, sentenced to death and hanged. 15,000 children were deported to Theresienstadt. Only 100 survived.
Hass hilft
Hatred is no help for anybody. There would be no point in coming here if I were full of hatred. In my view, you, the younger generation, didn't do it.
Ich habe gewonnen.
I have won. I'm still alive. They didn't destroy me. Only 2 children from Stuttgart are still alive today. Garry Fabian and Inge Auerbacher.